The OCC supervises over 1,200 banks in the United States. Its top official, Joseph Otting, has attracted attention for his actions against Wells Fargo. In particular, he's also caused a stir in D.C. over his efforts to reform community lending, which is resurfacing debate on redlining. Let's take it down to Washington now, where Yahoo Finance's Brian Chung is joined by Comptroller Otting in an exclusive interview. Brian?
Hi, Julie. So we are here in Washington, D.C., and I'm sitting here with Comptroller of the Currency, Joseph Otting. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning. It's my pleasure.
So I wanted to kick it off with a conversation about the Community Reinvestment Act. As Julie was just saying, it's attracted quite a lot of attention down here in D.C. It's a 40-year-old statute that basically enforces bank lending laws to low and moderate income areas. You and the FDIC have proposed some ways to reform it, to modernize it. If you could just kind of summarize quickly for our viewers what those changes are.
Oh, sure. Well, good morning, everybody. First of all, CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, was really intended to ensure that banks serve the entire communities to which they do banking activities. In late 2017, the OCC and FDIC and Fed began a journey to look at how could we modernize that. In August of 2018, we issued what is an advance notice of proposed rulemaking, where we got 1,500 comments that created the framework for the structure of the NPR that we issued in November and then was published in January around it. Probably the four core things that we have focused on that is, one is what qualifies, and believe it or not, since 1977, there wasn't a list that detailed what items qualified. Second of all, where does CRA activity count? And so we've looked at the assessment areas and what qualifies where banks can do the activities. The third item was, how do we measure CRA? And there isn't good clarity today for community groups, nonprofits, civil rights organizations to understand how are banks actually reviewed. And then the last is how we report CRA. One of the core things I think that we found is that banks don't have that data readily available other than their performance evaluation.
So critics of the reform have said that because it would expand some of the amount of activities that would qualify for CRA credit, like you were mentioning, that it might make it easier for banks to get away with avoiding low or moderate income communities, which has raised some concern about redlining, the kind of previous era of banks deliberately not lending to certain areas of color in some cases. What's your response to that? The Federal Reserve also hasn't signed off on the proposal, which is worth noting.
Yeah. On the issue of redlining, nothing in this provision would change the ability for us to make sure that redlining does not occur across America. And redlining is generally focused with discrimination. And as everybody knows, we have the Equal Credit and Fair Housing that would prohibit that. It is our viewpoint that when you look at this provision, there's about $480 billion that's spent annually on CRA. And by including all the assessment areas, we think that this could increase by $100 billion of more activity going into communities across America. Regarding the list, all we did was accumulate exactly what the FDIC and the Fed are doing today. So the list that we put out for public comment actually is everything that's being done today.
And worth mentioning that it is open for public comment. You recently just extended it for 30 days through April, which means people who have thoughts on this type of reform can chime in. There was a report in the Journal that said you've been talking to some big banks. I just want to give you the opportunity to clear the air on that. Have you had conversations?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
what's the feedback been so far?
First of all, I would assure you that we've talked to service providers to the industry that will have to be able to provide data. Almost every day, I speak to hundreds of people from communities. Yesterday, we had the National Diversity Coalition in. We spent with 40 or 50 of their representatives from around the U.S. to talk about CRA. We've met with the mid-sized bank groups in both groups and individuals, and we've talked to most of the major bank CEOs. And I think, people are really pleased and supportive that we've took this initiative on. The data from the ANPR said that 94% of the people felt that CRA should be modernized. And there clearly will be things that we will learn through the NPR that allow us to modify it to make this the rule the best that it can be.
So I want to switch gears quickly to just supervision of the big banks. The OCC has fined Wells Fargo a number of times, and recently you did fine 5 former executives, and then there was the DOJ SEC just last week. Is that whole chapter over for Wells Fargo, the issues that they've faced? I know you can't speak maybe specifically to the bank, but broadly, how do you approach making sure that big banks don't do that type of thing?
I think that's part of the supervision process. We have expectations that banks' management and their boards will operate in a safe and secure manner. That they implement and abide by laws, and that they treat their customers in a fair way. So we apply that equally across all banks that we provide supervision.
And then quickly, broad bank health, I know that you provide semi-annual updates to risks that are facing the banking industry. Obviously, we're watching markets right now, some fears of the coronavirus. Is that something that you're worried about? Are there other things in the banking industry that you worry about with regards to the health of the industry?
Sure. We are quite comfortable with the health of the banking industry today. It is, we believe, safe and secure. It's the best capitalization that we've ever seen in the industry and the best liquidity. However, there are always issues that come up on the horizon. Clearly, cybersecurity is something we spend an enormous amount of time on, ensuring that institutions are prepared to deal with any kind of cyber activity. And then we have things like the coronavirus that will pop up, and we try to understand the impact of risks that institutions would feel the impact from.
You're not guiding banks at the moment?
Absolutely not. We take precautions within the OCC around travel, and we leave those issues up to the management of the financial institutions.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.